Hello Suzuki parents, this is another video just to help you guys with your home practice, remembering some of our tips and tricks for getting your kids to work on not just the songs themselves, but a lot of the technique and a lot of the posture really necessary to really get down, because of course as we get into harder and harder pieces later on, that technique becomes completely indispensable. And of course, as a Suzuki teacher, we always want to work on the tone too, and that posture and that technique is sort of 100% necessary for getting a really good sound. Let's talk about some of the basic things that we can work on in order to work on some of those techniques and some of those posture things. A lot of the things like the bow hold itself, or the violin hold, or getting the fingers on the tapes, all those kind of things. First, I want to go over just a little bit about the process. So when it comes to learning the music itself, you'll start to notice that after a few lessons, after a few songs that we learn, students will really start to be able to pick up stuff a lot of the time by ear. So in other words, if you put on a record and have them listening to it, which you should, and listening is definitely a big part of the Suzuki method, but if you have them listening, they're going to be able to pick out a lot of that because, you know, they have lots of energy. They're really interested in the songs that they're playing. So they'll pretty much almost figure it out on their own. Of course, if they don't, we'll work on that in lessons. But a lot of the times they do. And they'll do, since they're thinking about the music, this kind of gets all sorts of wonky. So that's where we step in and we can kind of help them out with a little bit of the posture and the technique right from the very beginning. So let's go ahead, let's start from song 1, which is Twinkle. A lot of the times at the very beginning, we've got a basic bow hold, a nice outside hold where we've got the thumb on the clip here. Eventually we do move that to the inside, which we can talk about, but for the sake of this video, we're not going to worry too terribly much about this until some of the later songs. So for Twinkle, the very first thing you'll notice when students start to use that independent third finger, so they're no longer putting 1, 2, 3, which if your student is still doing that, there's a good reason. That helps build that muscle memory so that without even having to think about it, I can set my fingers in those positions because I've been doing it for a very long time. Students will start to pick up on that actually really quickly at the beginning when we have them put the 1, 2, 3 first while they're playing Twinkle. Now, when they start to move over to putting the 3 first and then kind of putting those other fingers on, the very first thing that will happen is that pinky will want to get out of the way. Now, for a while, we won't use the pinky until I usually use it starting right around perpetual motion, and then we can kind of really work on it, and we kind of go back and work on it a little bit too. And I'll sometimes have them do little exercises where they put down the pinky just to prepare for it. But almost everybody wants to move that pinky out of the way. They think it's going to get in the way, but it's not, right? So one exercise that you can do is just have them start, first of all, with the B section of Twinkle, the cheese, as I like to call it, going from the open E. And then what I like to do usually, so I'll draw 2 little eyeballs, and I'll say, make sure the pinky doesn't run away and hide. Make sure the pinky watches, because the pinky's going to have a job soon, and it wants to know what these other fingers are doing. So when they go from the open E, have them take their time putting the third finger down, whoop, and keeping their pinky on top and watching. If they do this, they got to start over from the open E again. Now, before they even put the bow on the string, they can practice this. I usually like to tell them to wiggle their fingers, and then wiggle the third finger, wiggle the fourth finger, since those are the 2 we'll be working with. And then as they put the third finger down, make sure that pinky watches. Right? Now, is that going to fix it immediately? No, it's probably still going to want to pull back there every time they stop thinking about it. But we're continuing to work on that. Making that a challenge in a lesson is a really good idea. So speaking of the challenges, which all the challenges that we'll talk about today, my thing is I would definitely not, you don't want to get too picky because they can sort of get a little bit bogged down in that, and then their brains aren't going to be wanting to think about, oh, I want to make sure my pinky's on top like that. They're just going to be thinking, oh my gosh, I want to be done. So what I usually like to say is make like 1 challenge per lesson, even if we're working on like 5 or 6 different technical things at a time. Just always pick 1 and really focus on that one. When they do a good job, make sure that they're rewarded. Either, you give them a thumbs up, and there's candy, stickers, whatever it is that you guys, of course, do at home. In lessons, usually what I like to do is if they can get that down really, really well, that means that we're able to continue on working with the pieces and we can move on to the next piece even quicker. So that's the kind of thing I like to use as a reward. And I just honestly get really excited when they actually do some of these technical things because they are challenging. They're challenging for me. They're challenging for everybody. Okay, so that's the twinkle one with keeping that pinky from moving back like that because eventually when we need it, it's got to be right there for us. Okay. In lightly row, usually about at this point in time, they'll be able to put that third finger down and they won't have to kind of set them up. So then the next step is making sure that they're always watching and keeping their fingers on those tapes. So for instance, a lot of the times they'll want to pull it like this. You got to make sure to tell them to keep it all the way over here. There's a couple ways you can do that. I'll sometimes use little finger puppets. Tell them to line it up with a finger puppet, like that. Now, the thing you got to watch out for is if they just do that, right? So sometimes you have to tell them feet pointing this way, point the violin. You can even sometimes prep them by doing this, having them follow your hand with the violin in their body as opposed to actually turning their feet in whatever direction. And that'll usually help to kind of line this up so that they're looking at the violin as opposed to bringing the violin over to their eyes. So when they do that, just simply having them place 1, 2, 3, then I usually like to pop them up like fireworks, and then we can do that again. And then, of course, practicing that slowly in a song. Speaking of slow, I like to have this guy ready at pretty much all times because students, especially when they really start getting into the music, they like to go nice and fast, which we will definitely go fast. But at the beginning, to really get that, oops, that's the wrong one. At the very beginning, I like to have this close by just so I can really work on some of those technical things without going so fast that they're getting bogged down and their fingers are just kind of going all over the place. So always make sure to go nice and slow when we do that. For Song of the Wind, of course, it's the bow retakes a lot of the times, our staccato, keeping it in the middle of the bow. But it can also be this little fun spot. I'll sometimes warm it up by having them stick the 1 and they just do the bunny hop, 3 to 3 from the A string to the E string while that first finger stays down, right? And then usually it's a lot of forgetting about the bow circles. So you can do a challenge where if they forget about a bow circle, another fun toy I like to use in class. You can use any kind of noise-making device, really. But I like to use this guy. I don't remember where I put the metal pole. Like that. So in other words, if they forget to do one, yep, bum, 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 ba. They want to go up bow on that next part. Got to go back to the beginning. That giving them that challenge, it provides the environment necessary for them to have to think about it, which is really what you want to do. Because just telling somebody bow circle, they're not going to remember that. Forcing them to remember it by playing a game where they have to remember all the bow circles, that's usually the way to go with pretty much all of this stuff. Okay, for Song of the Wind, or actually for Go Talent Roadie, or for any of them actually, I want to talk a little bit about the bow hold at this point, because once they really start getting into this stuff, this is going to do all sorts of goofy stuff. So regardless if they have the outside hold or the inside hold, the most important thing about this bow hold, well, there's technically 5 important things about this bow hold. Keeping the pinky on top. That pinky helps us balance the bow. Even with these other fingers on there, that pinky is really what holds it up. If I take it off, the bow becomes very heavy and it becomes very clumsy. So keeping that pinky on top at all times is super important. I like to say the top octagonal. Some teachers like to say the side octagonal. When we really start getting a little more nuanced bow grip, then I kind of move mine a little bit in between both, depending on if I need a big sound or if I need to tilt it forward and have a little bit more nuanced of a sound. But if it's easiest, just put it on the top right now to hold it up, right? These 2 fingers being on the frog instead of pulling them up like this, we want to make sure that we have a good grip on a bow. What I like to usually tell the students is would they want me to hold their violin with my fingertips like this? Usually they're going to say no, usually, hopefully. It's the same with the bow. We just don't get a good grip if our fingers are kind of barely making contact. We get a much better grip if we're actually holding on to it. Think about holding a glass with just the fingertips. You usually want to make sure you use the whole fingers. So, and then the first finger here, well, first of all, thumb, sorry. Make sure that that's nice and bent. A lot of students will start to do that. And if you noticed, immediately that starts to pull off those fingers. So making sure underneath, sometimes you have to look under there like that, making sure that that thumb is nice and bent is super important. And of course the first finger, a lot of the times, especially if the bow hold starts to move one way or another like this, that finger will kind of either go back like this or barely be in contact. I like to say between the first and the second knuckle, you want to put it somewhere right in there. Sometimes usually what I'll do, if they're having a lot of trouble knowing exactly where to put their fingers, I like to use these little cheap little spot stickers. I don't really know what they're for. I think they're for like garage sales and stuff. But you can find them at Walmart or probably anywhere I can imagine that sells such things. And the most important part is you can use them. Boop. For instance, if you're trying to get the bow right on the thumb tip, you can put a sticker right on the thumb tip. You can put a sticker right on the silver clip of the bow. Boop, oops. Put it on the wrong hand. So that you have to match sticker the sticker like that. And then if it starts to come off, you can say, uh-oh, I can see that sticker. Boop, and they got to hide it like that. Same with the pinky on top, putting one on the tip, putting one there, putting two on the frog, putting two on these fingers. Usually there you're going to want to put it on the pad and not the very tip, since it's the pads that touch on there. And then putting a sticker here and putting a sticker in between these two knuckles right there is also another helpful one, just to really get them to think about the bow. Now, as they're playing, pick one of those and work on it. So have them play all of Go Tell Aunt Rhody while trying to cover up that sticker with their sticker on their finger, or pinky one, or the thumb one. Oops. Boop, there we go. Or the fingers, right? Picking one at a time will help them to help them not get frustrated. So that they can kind of concentrate on just one thing at a time, really master that, then of course we can move on later. All right, I hope this video was helpful. Happy practicing.